Wyoming Territory, August 1879. The rain had been beating down for hours when the cowboy spotted the shape along the trail crumpled beside a broken wagon wheel, half covered by a soaked shawl and still as death. Orin Fletcher pulled his horse to a halt, water dripping from the brim of his hat, breath fogging in the cold air. He dismounted fast, boots sinking into the wet earth, and knelt beside the woman. "Miss," he said, voice low, careful. "Can you hear me?" Her eyes fluttered open, dazed and glassy. Her lips were blue from cold. He touched her arm. She was freezing. "All right now," he murmured, shifting carefully to lift her. "I got you. You are safe." He wrapped his coat around her and lifted her gently into his arms. She was light, soaked through, her curls stuck to her cheeks. The storm cracked louder above them, and he carried her to his horse, holding her close as if she might vanish if he let go. "I am taking you out of this," he said. Orin rode hard through the rain, one arm around her, the other keeping the horse steady. He had seen things in his 30 years' war, hunger, men breaking down from loss, but this was different. He felt it in his chest. Something about her, even near unconscious and rain-drenched, made him feel like he had just found something he did not know he had been looking for. His cabin sat 2 miles off the main trail, tucked beneath a ridge of pines. He got her inside quick, set her down on his cot, and stoked the fire until it roared. Her dress was muddy and wet, and he hesitated only a second before grabbing one of his clean shirts and a blanket. He turned away as he worked fast to get her into dry clothes, wrapping her up tight. When he turned back, she was watching him. "Where am I?" Her voice cracked, hoarse from cold and fear. "My place. You were out cold on the trail. I found you." Her eyes moved around the cabin rough-hewn walls. A single table, shelves lined with tools and coffee tins. "You live here alone?" she asked. "For a while now," he said. "Name is Orin Fletcher." She blinked slowly, lips trembling. "Kiera Ellsworth. I was headed toward Fort Bridger. My wagon broke. My horse spooked and ran. I could not leave my children." Orin's head snapped toward her. "Children?" Her eyes filled. "Zadie and Zeke. They are 6 and 4. I left them in the wagon when I went to get help. I thought I could get back in time before the storm turned. But I fell. I hit my head." Orin was already grabbing his coat. "Where?" She gave him directions with shaking hands. "Please, they are all I have." He saddled his horse again without a word and rode into the storm. It took him the better part of an hour to find the wagon, tipped halfway into a ditch. Inside, 2 small faces peered out from wrapped blankets, eyes wide and frightened. "You are Mama's friend?" the girl asked, clutching her brother. "I am now," Orin said, lifting them both into his arms. "Come on. We are going home." By the time he returned, Kiera was sitting up, tears streaking her cheeks when she saw them. "Zadie, Zeke." The children raced to her, and she wrapped them up tight, sobbing into their hair. Orin stood by the door, hat in hand, chest tight. "You saved them," she whispered, looking up at him. He gave a small nod. "Would not have left them out there." That night, Kiera sat in Orin's only chair, the children asleep in the cot. She held a mug of broth he had made, her hands still trembling. "I do not know how to thank you," she said. "You do not have to." She looked at him then, really looked. "You are kind." He shrugged. "Just trying to do right." "You did more than that." The logs in the fire cracked, orange light flickering across her face. She was beautiful even now, especially now. Strong even in her fear. Brave even in her worry. "Where is their father?" he asked, careful. "Gone," she said simply. "A month after Zeke was born. Fever took him." Orin nodded slowly. "I am sorry. I thought I could make it on my own. I was heading west to find work, maybe a schoolhouse town, but the wagon was old. I guess I was foolish. No, he said. His voice had weight in it now. You were trying to build a life. That ain't foolish. Kiera looked down into her cup, then back up at him. Why do you live alone, Orin Fletcher? He took a breath. Was in the war. Rode with the 2nd Colorado Cavalry. After it ended, I did not fit back in. Tried mining, ranching. Nothing stuck, so I came out here. Built this place with my hands. Figured I would stay until I figured out what I was missing. And did you? He looked at her, the way her eyes held his now, steady and warm despite all she had been through. Maybe, he said. A long silence settled between them, not uncomfortable. The storm had moved off, leaving only the sound of fire and the soft breaths of sleeping children. You can stay here, he said finally, until you figure out your next step. Kiera smiled softly. That is kind. But I do not want to be a burden. You are not, he said, voice low. You are not. She looked at him for a long time. Then she nodded. He stood and brought her another blanket. Thank you, she whispered as she tucked it around her. He crouched beside the cot, brushing a curl from Zadie's sleeping face, then looking at Kiera again. You are not alone anymore, Kiera. She held his gaze, and for the first time in a long while she believed it. By morning, the air had turned crisp, the kind that hinted at fall creeping down from the mountains. Mist clung low to the pines, and the world outside Orin's cabin felt hushed, like it was holding its breath. Inside, Kiera stood by the cook stove, sleeves rolled back, her hair pinned up with a bit of twine she'd found. She moved carefully, pouring cornmeal into a pan, eyes flicking now and then to the children still curled beneath quilts on the cot. Orin leaned against the doorframe, arms folded. He didn't speak right away, just watched her. You didn't have to do all that, he said after a while. You ought to be resting. I'm not the resting kind, she replied, not looking up. Besides, your pantry gave me a few ideas. He stepped further into the room, glancing at the pan. Looks like you know your way around a meal. I'd cook over rocks and twigs if I had to, she said. But this stove's a welcome change. He smiled just a little. You always travel light? She finally looked at him then. Wasn't much choice. The wagon belonged to a family in Illinois. We joined up for safety till Cheyenne, but they turned off east. After that, it was just me and the children. Must have been hard. She didn't answer at first. Then, I've never had much that wasn't hard. Zadie stirred behind them, her small voice muffled by the quilt. Mama! Kiera turned quickly and knelt beside the cot, brushing her daughter's hair back. I'm here. Zeke blinked awake too, sitting up slow. Are we still in the woods? No, love, Kiera said. We're safe now. Orin crouched beside them. You too hungry? Zadie nodded. My tummy's talking. Well, he said, standing again. Then let's feed it. By mid-morning, Orin was out splitting wood near the lean-to, sleeves rolled and shirt sticking to his back with sweat. The rhythm of the axe helped clear the knot in his chest, though nothing about the day felt ordinary. He heard the door creak and glanced up. Kiera stepped out, shading her eyes, a worn apron tied at her waist. I stacked the dishes, she said. Hope you don't mind. You don't need to keep doing for me. I know, she said, but I want to. He rested the axe against the stump and wiped his brow. You always this stubborn? Only when I've got reason. He nodded toward the trees. You thinking about what comes next? She crossed her arms, eyes distant. There's a town east of here, Bishop's Pass. I heard they might need someone to teach, if I can get the children settled. He set his hands on his hips. That's near 2 days by wagon. I'd walk it barefoot if I had to. You got grit, he said. But you shouldn't have to do it alone. She looked at him then, quiet and steady. You offering to come along? He didn't answer right away. I'm saying you've got options. Kiera tilted her head. And what would you want if you had the choosing? He took a breath, eyes meeting hers. I'd want to see what it's like having you here a while longer. A breeze stirred the trees behind them. The sound of the children laughing inside floated through the open window. She didn't speak for a moment. Then, softly, I haven't had a man look at me like that since before Zeke was born. I ain't looking for the past, Orin said. I'm looking at now. Her throat moved as she swallowed. It's been a long time since I felt safe. Then stay, he said. No debt, no pressure. Just stay. She stepped down off the porch and stood close enough he could see the faint freckles across her cheeks. The way her breath caught. You really mean that? She asked. He nodded. Every word. She reached out and touched his sleeve, fingers light. Then maybe I will. And just like that, something settled between them, unspoken but solid. Not a promise. Not yet. But the start of something that could be. Something that felt like it had roots. Inside, Zeke called for his mother, and Kiera turned toward the door. I should go see what those two are up to. Orin watched her go, watched the way she moved through his world like she belonged. And for the first time in years, he didn't feel alone in it. The sun slipped low behind the ridge, casting long shadows across the clearing as Orin walked back from the spring with the water pail balanced in one hand. He paused just outside the cabin, catching the sound of Kiera's voice through the open window, soft, measured, reading something aloud. And the colt ran, faster than the wind, until he reached the edge of the canyon, where he waited for his mother under the stars. She closed the book gently, and there was a hush that followed Zeke's breathing, even Zadie's small sigh like a feather settling. Orin stepped quietly through the doorway. Kiera sat cross-legged on the floor beside the cot, the children curled up on either side. The light from the oil lamp painted her face in gold and shadow. They're asleep? He asked softly. She nodded, her hand resting on Zeke's back. Out like stones. He set the pail down near the hearth. Where'd the book come from? It was tucked in the wagon box. Belonged to my sister. She used to read it to me when we were girls. You close with her? We were. Her voice thinned, almost faded. She died 4 winters ago. Pneumonia, back in Iowa. Orin crouched beside the fire, feeding in a few pine knots. You the younger or older? Younger by 5 years. She looked after me when our mother passed. She drew the blanket higher over Zadie's shoulders. It's strange. I still reach for her in my thoughts, like she might answer. He didn't speak for a moment. The only sound was the low crackle of the fire. I do the same with my brother, he said finally. He didn't make it out of Missouri. When I left to enlist, he was still a boy. I always thought I'd get back in time to teach him how to ride proper. Never did. Kiera looked at him, the space between them closing. What was his name? Eli. I'm sorry, Orin. He nodded once. Me too. She stood, brushing her hands on her skirt, and glanced toward the back door. You've got a patch of turnips growing under that pine. I saw it earlier when Zadie and I went to hang the wash. I try to keep something growing. Soil's rocky, but it listens if you're patient. She smiled, faint and real. That's a good way to put it. He watched her walk to the shelf near the stove, where she ran her fingers along the rim of a tin. You've kept this place in order. Most men living alone let things go to ruin. I built it to last. I can tell. He stood and moved nearer, stopping just behind her. You miss being around folks? Sometimes, she said, but only the right ones. I've known enough noise and company to be grateful for quiet. Same. She turned to face him, and the lamplight caught her eyes tired. Yes, but steady. This quiet doesn't feel lonely. No, he said. It doesn't. They stood like that for a beat too long, neither stepping back. Do you think, she said slowly, we might plant more than turnips come spring? He didn't answer with words, just reached up and gently brushed a curl behind her ear. His hand lingered a moment longer than it needed to. She didn't pull away. I'd like that, he said. She nodded, eyes not leaving his. So would I. The wind picked up outside, rustling the pine boughs overhead. Inside, the world held still. Orin took a breath, deep and quiet. You ever worked a plow? I've driven one with a stubborn mule and a bad axle, she said. I can manage better than that. He chuckled low. You'll fit in just fine. She reached past him and lifted the kettle from the hook. I'll make tea. You've had a long day. Not longer than yours. She poured the water over dried mint leaves and passed him a cup. Their fingers brushed, and neither of them moved away from the touch. Orin looked down at her hand. You think the children would like a swing? I've got spare rope and a good limb out back. Her smile came slow, sure. They'd love it. He looked toward the window, where the last of the light was fading. Then I'll build it in the morning. A quiet passed between them again, but this time it wasn't heavy. It was something else, something settled. Kiera sipped the tea, her other hand trailing along the rough table edge. I never imagined I'd end up here. Not like this. He glanced at her. Do you regret it? She shook her head. No. It's the first place that's felt like it might belong to me. Orin stepped closer. It does. If you'll have it. She raised her eyes to his, and whatever was unspoken between them before now stood clear. I will. Her voice didn't waver. Then neither of them moved for a long time. The fire burned low, the tea cooled between their hands, and the cabin that had always been just enough for one now felt like it was waiting for more. The swing hung by midday. Orin had lashed the rope tight to a low cottonwood limb behind the cabin, its bark pale against the sky. Zadie took to it first, gripping the worn board with bare hands, her laughter rising over the clearing as Kiera steadied the rope for her. Zeke waited his turn, bouncing on his heels, cheeks flushed from the sun. Orin stepped back to watch, arms crossed, thumb rubbing absently along the seam of his sleeve. Kiera glanced over her shoulder, catching his eye. She hasn't laughed like that since last winter, she said, brushing her skirt back as the swing rose again. I reckon she's got reason now. She's always been the brave one, Kiera said. Even when I couldn't be. You seem steady enough to me. I wasn't, she said, voice low. Not in Kansas, not when things got bad. I just kept moving. That's all I knew how to do. He nodded slowly, gaze following the swing's arc. Sometimes motion's the only thing that keeps a person upright. She let the rope go, letting Zeke climb on. He grinned up at her, holding tight as Orin gave the swing a gentle push. Kiera stepped to his side, close enough their shoulders nearly brushed. I thought about turning back more than once, she said. But I was afraid I'd disappear if I did. You didn't. No, she said. I didn't. They stood in silence for a while, watching the children take turns, the wind lifting the edge of Kiera's shawl. Her hair was coming loose at the nape of her neck, tendrils curling in the heat. Orin wanted to reach for it, to smooth it back, but he kept his hands still. Later, while the children napped inside, Kiera sat on the porch steps mending a tear in Zeke's trousers. Orin returned from the edge of the woods with a small sack slung over his shoulder. What's that? She asked, threading her needle. Found a patch of wild gooseberries along the ravine. Figured they'd do for supper. You know how to make a cobbler? Not worth a damn, he said. But I know how to follow orders. She laughed softly, shaking her head. Bring them in, then. I'll show you. Inside, she set him to work rinsing berries while she measured flour with a practiced hand. The cabin smelled of wood smoke and something sweet by the time the crust was rising over the coals in the Dutch oven. Orin wiped his hands on a cloth and leaned against the counter, watching her fold the last of the cloths from the wash. Did you always plan to teach? He asked. No. I learned letters from my father, but I thought I'd marry young and stay on a farm. Her voice held no bitterness, just fact. When I lost him, I started taking in sewing, helping with lessons when I could. It kept food on the table. He stepped forward slowly. You ever think about settling here? Not just passing through. She looked up from the folded shirt in her lap. If I did, would there be room for us? There already is. Her hands stilled. You're not just saying that out of kindness? He reached down and took the shirt from her knees, setting it aside before kneeling in front of her. I've built this place with the hope someone might want to share it, he said. I didn't expect it to be you. But now that it is, I can't think of a better truth. Her breath caught. She raised a hand to his cheek, fingers rough from work but gentle on his skin. I don't want somewhere to pass through anymore, she said. He leaned forward, resting his forehead against hers. Then stay. I will. They stayed like that for a long moment, close and quiet, the oven warming the room, the children still dreaming under patchwork quilts. Outside, the wind had died down, and the pines stood still against the slope. Orin reached for her hand, lacing their fingers together. Kiera squeezed gently. You said this place listens if you're patient. It does. She smiled, eyes soft. I think it finally heard us. He nodded and rose, pulling her up with him, their hands still joined. Let's go see if that cobbler's ready. And together they turned toward the fire. The first frost came early that year, curling the edges of the cabbage leaves behind the cabin and setting the porch steps slick before sunup. Orin rose before light, as he always had, but now there was another shape beside him under the quilt, warm and still breathing slow against his shoulder. Kiera hadn't stirred when he slipped from bed, but her hand had found his in the dark, and she'd held it for a moment before letting go. He moved quiet through the room, careful not to wake the children on their cot across the way. Zeke had kicked off his blanket again. Orin tucked it back over him, brushing the boy's tangled hair gently from his eyes. Then he pulled on his boots, shrugged into his coat, and stepped out into the morning. Smoke curled upward from the chimney, catching on the pale light starting to creep over the ridge. The chickens were restless, feathers puffed against the cold. The mule stomped once in the paddock, waiting for feed. Orin worked through the chores as the sky turned, his breath clouding the air, his mind already on the day ahead. When he came back in, Kiera was up. She stood at the table, sleeves rolled, hands dusted with flour, shaping dough for morning bread. You didn't wake me, she said without looking up. You looked peaceful. I was dreaming about my mother's kitchen, she said. She always baked early in the fall. Said the smell helped keep the cold out. He poured water from the kettle into a basin and washed the dirt from his hands. Zadie asked last night if we'd stay through Christmas, Kiera added, glancing at him now. I told her we'd talk about it. He dried his fingers on a rag. You want to? I do, she said, but I'd rather not be a guest. You aren't. She met his gaze. Not in your heart. I know that. But I mean proper. I want to build something here, plant what we'll need, mend what's worn out, tend the ground same as you. I want to make this mine too. Orin stepped toward her, slow, steady. He reached out and took both her flour-dusted hands in his. Then let's make it so, he said. Not just through winter. For good. Her breath caught, but she didn't pull away. "You mean that?" "I do." She smiled, wide and real, and he leaned down and kissed her slow, sure, with the kind of care that came from knowing exactly what was being offered and what was being received. That afternoon, they walked with the children to the far edge of the meadow, where the land sloped gentle toward the creek. Orin pointed out where the spring thaw always softened the soil first, and Kiera knelt to test it with her fingers. "This is good ground," she said. "We could put in beans here, maybe some squash." Zadie tugged at her skirt. "Will we still have a garden when the snow comes?" Kiera pulled her daughter close. "We'll have each other. That's what matters." They stayed there until the light turned gold and long. Orin built a small bench beneath the cottonwoods before supper, and when the children were asleep that night, Kiera found him sitting there, sharpening his knife by lantern. She settled beside him, wrapping her shawl tighter. "I wrote a letter to the bishop's school," she said. "Told them I'm not coming after all." He looked at her, brows raised. "I didn't need to anymore," she said. "I've got work enough here. Real work." He set the knife aside and took her hand. "We'll need a bigger table. Come spring, we'll build it. And a second room," she added. "Zadie's getting taller by the day." He nodded. "We'll start framing after the thaw." She leaned into him, resting her head on his shoulder. "You ever think life could turn like this?" "No," he said. "But I'm glad it did." They sat in the hush of the evening, the porch lantern flickering behind them, the scent of wood smoke on the air. Through the trees, a coyote cried once and fell silent. The stars pressed close, bright and cold above them. Weeks passed. The frost deepened, and the first snow fell soft and slow over the cabin roof. Inside, the fire never went out. Kiera taught Zadie her letters by lantern, and Orin carved a cradle from pine for Zeke's toy bear. They shared the work of winter hauling wood, mending boots, preserving what they'd gathered, and when the nights grew long, they talked low and quiet beside the hearth, hands twined, hearts steady. In the spring, when the thaw came and the creek ran fast and wild again, they marked the land with stakes and string. The new room took shape, framed strong with Orin's hands and Kiera's careful planning. Zadie planted beans in neat rows, and Zeke chased the mule in muddy boots. One morning, Kiera stepped onto the porch with a letter in hand. She held it out to Orin, who was sanding the new windowsill. "It's from the schoolhouse committee," she said, "asking if I'd consider teaching the children in this valley. Just a few, no more than 10. He set the sanding block down. "You want to?" She looked out at the clearing, at the swing still hanging, at the garden starting to green. "I want to do it right here, in our home." He smiled, lines crinkling at the corners of his eyes. "Then we'll build a desk beside the stove." They married in early summer beneath the cottonwoods, with the children standing close and the sun warm on their shoulders. No preacher, just hands joined and promises spoken quiet and true. Afterward, they shared bread and fresh jam on the bench Orin had built, and when the stars came out, they danced slow in the grass, just the two of them. Years passed, but the cabin never emptied. Laughter echoed through the rooms, and the garden grew fuller each season. Kiera's hair turned silver at the temples, and Orin's steps slowed, but their hands found each other every night steady, warm, and sure. They built a life that held. A life no storm could wash out, no cold could shake. A life made not of ease, but of earned peace, rooted deep in love that never left.